Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about whether production diseases impact the balancing skills of laying hens that are kept in loose housing systems. So loose housing systems or multi-tier systems offer the laying hens an opportunity for locomotion, which is great because then they are able to jump or fly between the different perches and tier levels. But we also see a high incidence of health issues in these systems. So we see feather pecking, foot disease, and also keel bone damage. So these health issues do reduce the welfare of the laying hens and can lead or increase mortality, which can then in turn have an economic impact on producers. It's assumed that for laying hens in these systems, the reason for the high incidence of keel fractures is that they sometimes bounce or hit their keel bone on the structures. So in humans, it's crucial to have good balance in order to prevent falls and prevent subsequent injuries. And so we ask the question, can we apply this fundamental concept of good balancing skills to laying hens? And so that's the reason why we started the first ever study to further investigate and understand the association between poor health, so between keel damage, foot clad dermatitis, and poor wing feather cover, and the ability of laying hens to either maintain or recover balance when they encounter certain environmental conditions that you might see in loose housing systems, for example, crowding or poor lighting. And so to do this, we looked at both internal and external factors that may impact balance. So we looked at birds that had foot, wing, and keel damage, and then we also had a control group, which were healthy birds that weren't affected by any of these conditions. The external factors consisted of kind of a realistic representation of the environmental conditions that a bird might encounter. So we had a head mast that simulated poor or low lighting. We had perch obstacles that simulated a crowded condition, and the perch itself was also mechanical, so it could move or sway back and forth. And this kind of was a representation of the hen being pushed by another bird. And this can happen in crowded situations, for example, if many birds are trying to access the same resource, or perch in this case, all at once. So here you can kind of see those treatments. And so in addition to video footage, we also used these data loggers to record the movements of the birds as they were trying to balance themselves on this perch. And these recorded the movements in 3 different axes, or 3 directions. And this last one is with the obstacles. And so these types of data loggers can also be used in human studies, and they are used in human studies that look at balance, and they're able to measure quite a bit regarding to body movements. For example, intensity, which is one of the variables that we had in this study. So one of the things that we did look at was the incidence of falls, and what we found was that birds fall more when the perch is moving than when the perch is not. Also, in relation to falls, we did find that birds that had foot pad dermatitis and poor wing feather cover or wing feather damage had a greater risk of falling than the healthy birds. Another thing that we looked at was jumps, so jumping from the perch during the testing. And what we found was that the treatments where the birds were able to see is where the birds jumped. So in both of the mast treatments, there were no jumps. And this is interesting because birds do use visual cues from the environment when they're kind of planning out their trajectory or planning a jump to estimate the distance and certain things. And this is some data from the data loggers. So we're looking at the intensity of body movement. So in humans, one of the body movements during a loss of balance is raising the arms, and we can sort of see a similar behavior in laying hens in the form of wing flaps. And these behaviors can be measured with these acceleration data loggers. And what we found is that birds had the least intense movements in the treatments where they had a head mask and obstacles were placed on the perch. And the birds that had total freedom to move the wings and were able to see had the most intense body movements. And so things to consider with regards to these results are have to do with housing. So, for example, providing enough perch space so that the birds are able to perform balancing behaviors in order to prevent falls and then injuries that can result from these falls. And lastly, good health is also important. So preventing foot pad dermatitis and feather damage might also reduce the risk for falls and injuries such as keel fractures. So thank you all for listening, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much.